Good and Payson? Hello, Payson. Now we can talk to you. Good morning, Payson. You guys good to go?
We are ready.
Right on. Joseph, you good? YouTube? We're good here. So we'll get started 10 o'clock, Tuesday, May 30th. And I'll call this to order. Steve, would you lead us in the pledge this morning, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll get started with our regular agenda items. And this is a work session today, so I'm hoping we'll have a lot of really good discussion on all this. And 2A, information discussion regarding groundwater and groundwater management in Arizona and Gila County. And we have Chris here. Chris, if you just step up to the podium and state your name and where you're from.
Good morning, everybody. Chris Custis. I co-lead the Water for Arizona Coalition. I am from northern Arizona.
Good deal. So tell us about groundwater, Chris.
Thank you, supervisors. I appreciate the invitation today to talk about water. I'm sure many of you hear from your constituents, concerns, ideas about water. Gila County, you're certainly not alone. And so I was asked to come here today to talk about what's happening around the state. I'm primarily going to talk about groundwater from a statewide perspective, especially focusing on rural Arizona and how rural communities have been approaching their issues that are increasingly popping up in different parts of the state. We'll talk about that and what they have been working on in recent years. And so to get started, and I say I have a clicker here. Yeah, so get started. First going to talk about groundwater, what it is, what it looks like in the state of Arizona's water supply portfolio. We'll get into a little bit of hydrogeology. I promise it won't be too bad. We'll talk about how groundwater is managed or not throughout the state, and then we'll get into what rural communities have been, what they've been doing and asking for in recent years in response to challenges they're seeing. So one of the ways I like to explain the importance of groundwater in Arizona, one of the better ways, is to look at a pie chart of the state's water supply portfolio. So you see different colors, groundwater already important, 40%, but there's a couple things that are changing in this pie chart that I think are important. So one, Colorado River, that makes up 36% of our supply, but you all have been reading, you've been watching the news, what's happening to the Colorado River. It's shrinking, right? And so that portion of our water supply chart is going to be going down, and when that goes down, the groundwater slice is going to be increasing. So the result of less Colorado River water being delivered to the state, increasing dependence on groundwater. The orange slice, in-state rivers, that's primarily the Salt Verde Gila system. So these rivers, they are very responsive to rain events, snow, runoff. Just look what happened this winter. But a number of these rivers are also groundwater dependent. So for example, Tonto Creek. I have great memories of fishing with my grandpa in Tonto Creek. Great spots right behind Tontozona, right? So again, that orange slice also very dependent on groundwater. So the point here is groundwater is and always has been important in Arizona, and moving forward, it's going to become increasingly important as our overall reliance on the resource increases. Rural Arizona. Why is groundwater important? It's typically often the only water source for rural communities. So if you're in rural Arizona, the water that's coming out of your tap especially, there's a very good chance that's groundwater. So this map, this comes from the University of Arizona. The basins you see in green, greater than 75% reliance on groundwater. The basins in blue are more dependent on surface water, and typically, at least right now, that's Colorado River water. So again, the point, drinking water, groundwater, very important. So what is groundwater? I think you all know this, but it's the water that's found in the spaces between soil, sand, and rocks. Underground, it's a source for year-round flow in many of our rivers and springs, and it also provides that flow in between different precipitation events. And again, this map is good for a couple of reasons, because it's both accurate and it's not accurate. So that blue line that looks like a lake underground, that's not what actually groundwater looks like. It looks more like the water, the blue that's occurring in between the rocks and soil. So it's kind of all mixed in there. But that's a cross-section of what groundwater looks like underground. Different types of aquifers throughout the state. This is important because depending on what the aquifer is, the characteristics, that can affect water availability, the quality of the water, and how easy or hard it is to get that water. So up on the northern part of the state, the turquoise, that giant turquoise blob, that's the Colorado Plateau system of aquifers up there, and then in southern and western Arizona, the green, those are basin and fill aquifers. And so if we were to do a cross-section of what these different aquifers look like, in northern Arizona on the Coconino Plateau, these aquifers are very deep. This would be sort of like if you filled a bathtub with concrete and it hardened and it cracked. That's sort of what the aquifers look like up there. So the town of Williams, for example, has one of the deepest municipal wells in the country. It's about 4,000 feet deep. Basin fill aquifers, on the other hand, in southern Arizona and the western parts of the state, those would be like if you filled a bathtub up with sand and rocks and then filled it with water. So you have these giant basins, typically in alluvial areas, that have filled up over time with water. They are different types of aquifers, but one thing they do have in common here in the Southwest is they typically recharge pretty slowly, and then once the water's gone, it's gone, especially in these basin fill aquifers, because you have this loose collection of material. Once you pump the water out, the material compacts, and that's why you see things like fissures or land subsidence like you've heard about in southern Arizona. That's what's happening underground with those aquifers. So you all in Gila County, you're not really in either one of those. You're sort of in a transition zone from the basin and fill going up to the Coconino Plateau. And I didn't have a lot of time to do research, but there's not actually a whole lot of information out there when it comes to county-wide groundwater conditions or supplies. I did find this map. You can see that the dots represent wells from the Arizona Department of Water Resources. Not a lot of information in Gila County. I just circled it. But what is typical in Gila County's water supply portfolio, highly groundwater dependent. So this pie chart, out of the water use in the county, the green comes from groundwater, so nearly 95% dependent on groundwater. So that's pretty typical for rural Arizona. What is not typical in Gila County compared to rural Arizona is water demands. So not surprising to you all, nearly half water demands in Gila County come from mining. If this were, like, say, in the Wilcox Basin or the Wallapai Valley, most of those demands would be for irrigation or livestock. So a little different demand portfolio here in Gila County. The pie charts, these all come from Arizona Department of Water Resources data. They were put together by University of Arizona. They're going to have a fact sheet that's coming soon. Just that outlines facts for Gila County water supplies. All right, so that was a quick groundwater 101 summary. We're now going to get into how groundwater is managed in the state. And for this, we have to start with the 1980 Groundwater Management Act. This set up two types of groundwater management that were primarily designed for the urban areas around Phoenix and Tucson: active management areas and irrigation non-expansion areas. INAs, or irrigation non-expansion areas, these are pretty simple. It's just simply a hard freeze on irrigated acreage, just like the title suggests. Active management areas, not going to get into what all of these are in this presentation, but these are pretty rigid, very comprehensive groundwater management programs that are very state-driven. So they include conservation programs, recharge and recovery program, management plan, goal, and all of that is managed by the Department of Water Resources. And again, these were primarily set up for the Tucson and Phoenix areas. Up until last year, there was 5 active management areas, but last year in November, voters in the Douglas Basin approved the state's first new active management area in over 40 years. So that we now have 6 AMAs and 3 irrigation non-expansion areas. The first new irrigation non-expansion area was approved by the state in the Wallapai Valley Basin, again, end of last year. So where does that leave the rest of Arizona? So in this map, the lands you see in red, that's greater Arizona, or in the water community, we would say rural Arizona. In these parts of the state, there is no underlying groundwater management. And so what this means is anyone can come in to these red areas, drill a new well, and pump as much as they want, even if that pumping drains a neighbor's well, negatively impacts a community's water supply, or even if it's pumping water that is connected to a river or stream, and even if that water in the river and stream is owned by someone else downstream. So this is a pretty unique system of non-groundwater management. You've probably heard it called different things in the media or in different conversations. It's called open access because anyone can access the water. Free-for-all, whoever drills the deepest well wins, or institutionalized depletion because the only path forward is depletion. So I won't get into this, but we're seeing increasingly different types of impacts showing up throughout the state because of this lack of groundwater management. So these can be declining groundwater levels, impacts to existing wells. So if you bought, like say for example, a retirement home in Wilcox, you would reasonably expect there to be a water supply. People are finding out there actually isn't. So you're starting to see these issues come up in the news. Land subsidence, water quality risks, and then, of course, conflicts. So what the impacts look like, it's different in every part of the state, but in general, what we are seeing is groundwater generally is trending down in a number of different basins in rural Arizona. This is a map showing groundwater levels, change in groundwater levels over a 20-year period. The red dots mean they're going down. The blue dots mean they're going up. Just one thing to point out is there are a couple of blue dots scattered throughout rural Arizona, but there are a number of blue dots in the central part of the state. So what's happening there is groundwater levels have recovered with the importation of CAP water. So you're having CAP water, Colorado River water, offset groundwater pumping. So you're seeing the blue show up in like the Phoenix and Tucson areas, but then there's a lot less blue in rural Arizona. So again, that's sort of like explains what's happening with the different colors, but then again, as Colorado River supplies are decreasing, you're gonna see less blue over time in the central part of the state. So just providing that statewide view. Here's some examples of basins that have, in the last 10 years, experienced some significant water challenges. You can see index wells. These are wells that are set up to just measure groundwater levels that are managed by DWR. Declines, so Wilcox, average annual change, 28 feet going down. In La Paz County, the McMullen Basin, average change, 10 feet going down. Wallapai Valley Basin, where the new INA was designated, average change, 6 feet going down each year. So these are maps our team put together that show new wells over time. So starting in 1980 going through 2020. So you have the larger yellow dots you can see start to show up, especially after 2010. So on the left, Wilcox Basin in Cochise County, Upper San Pedro's on the right, and again you can just see the multiplication of wells over time. A couple other basins. So Verde River Groundwater Basin, same trend. You can see the village of Oak Creek. That's where my family moved to after my grandfather retired from the mining industry in 1980. Not a lot going on in 1980, but fast forward to the year 2000, many more wells, especially larger wells. Then on the right is the Wallapai Valley Groundwater Basin up in Mojave County. Same trend. So it's easy. I mean, we could talk about groundwater data all day if we wanted to, trend lines, numbers, but I think what's important to remember is that this is also a very human issue. A lot of people in rural Arizona are fully dependent on groundwater and they are facing real challenges. So our team went out, we interviewed a handful of folks, it's on our website, and I wanted to share this one interview from a resident in the Wilcox Basin. I think I might need some help pressing play on the video. there is sound to it.
My name's Vance Williams. I'm in San Arizona, Arizona. I'm on disability through the VA. Moved down here to help my father after my mother passed, and help myself because I got arthritis and the weather's better. Thought I was purchasing a place to live out the rest of my life in some comfort and some enjoyment. I figured it's a desert. There's got to be real strict water regulations. It's a desert. So I never even thought about it. When I moved in, I had to have the new pressure tank put in. And I was told the well was fine. Should be good. No big deal. Got it, pump turned on, could hear it. Nothing coming out. Went next door, talked to my neighbor and another neighbor who was there, and got the initial shock that the area was dry, and started digging, and it's been kind of downhill since then. Yeah, we were using 5-gallon jugs of water for 4 people, 4 adults. We built a thing to put the water in after you heated it up on the stove, and connect the air hose to it to pressurize it to do dishes to take showers with. That was the initial struggle with that, was how do you do dishes and rinse them properly and take a shower. We used the water in the hot tub to flush the toilet. The kids actually used a bucket for a long time, and it was like, this is ridiculous. I'm not 20, I'm not camping. Why am I having to live like this? We shouldn't be. Nobody's taking responsibility for it, and that's ridiculous. I like to think that I'm not typical, but there's a lot of retired people here. There's a lot of articles of people that spent years working to save their money and bought a house, and even before this went astronomical, within years they were dry. At that point, why aren't you guys thinking, hey, we got a problem? I feel silly because I didn't look into it, but being some idea about water in my mind, I thought, like I said, it's a desert. You gotta regulate the water in the desert. Not the tumbleweed, the water. And none. And it's shocking. I purchased a home, plan to be there, and it gets taken from you. What's the solution to being sustainable? We should have water. You have to have water. That's the worst part. It's required. You need to live. Why are you letting it be taken? I chose to join and serve when Desert Storm hit. Handshakes meant something. Businesses backed what they did. I felt the government, was doing what it was supposed to, looking out for people. That's I misunderstood the government. The government's supposed to be for the people. There is none of that here.
So again, that was a really, really quick tour of various impacts throughout the state. But again, the point is we can look at data all day, but when this does touch home, it touches home in very real ways for people out there. So in response to these challenges, over the years, we've seen rural communities throughout the state come forward to the state, especially the state legislature, seeking solutions, and that's been increasing over time. So I'm going to take a few minutes to walk you all through what that has looked like, and what you'll see is this has kind of started in different ways in different places, but over time, rural communities have gotten connected to each other, started talking to each other about solutions, and you're seeing more of that recently. So to really understand the story of how we got here and where the policy conversation is at, we really go back to 2010. There was a proposal that was referred by the legislature to create a new district in the Sierra Vista area. This was unique because it was actually a taxing district, and then seeing a taxing district in rural Arizona that nearly passed, that was sort of like what I'll call like a canary in the coal mine. It's like, okay, there is something going on out here, because typically you wouldn't expect a taxing district to come anywhere near passing in rural Arizona. So that was 2010, quiet for a few more years. Then you get to 2015. Residents in Wilcox came together. This was a very, very contentious process. The community was divided, but they came up with what was called a groundwater conservation area proposal. They referred that to the legislature. It was essentially shelved. 2015 also, the state received a petition from the San Simon Basin, also in southern Arizona, for the creation of a new irrigation non-expansion area. Also, that petition was shelved. A year later, first petition for a new irrigation non-expansion area in the Wallapai Valley Basin, also shelved by the state. In 2017, Governor Ducey convened a stakeholder process, the governor's water solutions process. The governor's office proposed a handful of reforms related to rural groundwater. No subsequent bills were introduced in 2018. 2017, there was a bill proposed to do a statewide study or survey of groundwater, and that was also rejected. So you're starting to see these issues come up at the state level and the policy level, but they don't go anywhere over this period of time. And then you start to see some small steps taken. So 2018, the legislature funded DWR to study groundwater in the Wallapai Valley Basin. That was the only water bill to pass that year. And then in 2019, this was the same year, the drought contingency plan also passed. The legislature also passed a bill to authorize groundwater study committees in Mojave and La Paz counties. And so what you'll see is, starting in 2019, water skyrockets in the public consciousness. So you start to see water showing up as a top issue among voters. And I think a huge part of that was was the drought contingency planning process, because that was a public dialogue, so that elevated Colorado River issues. And then going into 2019, in December, some of you probably remember, the Arizona Republic published a investigative study on groundwater pumping in rural Arizona. It got a lot of attention. A lot of the issues were focused on Cochise, Mojave, and La Paz counties. And so going into the 2020 session, with water being an elevated issue, there were at least I counted 60 plus water bills that were introduced in the state legislature. Very, very different from past years, where there was typically just a handful of water bills. This was the first year we saw an introduction of a bill called Rural Management Areas. This was introduced by a Republican in Mojave County, Regina Cobb. It was the first proposed introduced legislation that provided an alternative to new active management areas or new irrigation non-expansion areas. The intention was to have something more flexible, locally driven, and give communities more options versus AMA or do nothing. That proposal only received an informational hearing. It did not advance. Also in 2020, the Wallapai Valley area, the Mojave County, they petitioned a second time for a new INA up there. So you're starting to see more and more things surface at the state level in these years. And then we get to 2021, and that only continues. So Representative Cobb introduced the RMA bill again, didn't go anywhere. The Mojave study committees that were set up the previous year by the legislature, they recommend reforms to pass rural groundwater by majority vote. And then in this year, because again, the options, new AMA, INA, nothing. Citizens start to get organized, the ballot measures in the Douglas and Wilcox Basin in Cochise County, led by the Arizona Water Defenders down there. The same year, Yavapai County, in response to water concerns from their constituents, host a series of meetings to discuss the possibility of passing mandatory adequacy. This is one of the few tools that is available to rural Arizona where it would require a new subdivision to have a 100-year water supply. Again, it's pretty narrow, and ultimately Yavapai did not move forward with it. But again, just response to hearing concerns about water from their constituencies. So moving on to 2022, there is this was the former Governor's Water Council process under Ducey. There was a non-AMA committee or a Rural Groundwater Committee. Members from that group broke away because they were wanting to have discussion of new programs and policy, and we'll come back to that about what they did. February, the RMA bill was attached onto one of Representative Griffin's bills on the floor. It passed with pretty significant Democrat and Republican support, but the bill was ultimately withdrawn. And then in May of last year, Coconino, La Paz, Mojave, and Yavapai counties unanimously passed resolutions urging the legislature and the governor to pass laws to protect rural groundwater. So you're seeing a lot of increase in activity, especially in 2022. And then what's happening starting last year, what's different in past years, is rural communities, whether they're in the San Simon, Wilcox, Yavapai, Coconino, they're talking to each other. They're starting to get organized in how they engage on state policy. So a big reason why you're seeing more activity at the state level with rural communities coming forward, asking for more tools, more options. So August, November of last year, that group that broke away in January, they took up the old rural management area concept. I was a part of this group along with representatives from like Mojave, Coconino, Yavapai, and then residents in Wilcox, San Simon especially. Retooled that bill, and that's what came back this year, called the Local Groundwater Stewardship Area. Talk more about that later. But then November last year, the Douglas AMA, that passed by a local vote. So that's your state, that's the state's first new active management area down there. There was also a petition for the Wilcox AMA, that one failed. December, Wallapai Valley INA designated. So now let's get into this year. And now we're like, used to be able to fit on one slide things that happened on water over several years. Now we're talking only months because of everything that's going on in water. So January, governor's draft executive budget includes $5 million for local water planning, including setting up new AMAs. Skip over Colorado River for now, but again, that's just another point that's out there on water that's elevating the issue among voters and the public. So January, February, local groundwater stewardship area bill was introduced by Representative Biasucci, Republican from Mojave County in the House, and then Senator Borelli, Republican from Mojave County in the Senate. So two mirror bills. February, letter sent by a number of local leaders, local electeds from rural Arizona, urging passage of the bill. And then March, there was a 3-month process where different feedback on the bill was incorporated into an amended version. All right, and then even more things started happening in the last couple months. So recent polling, we've been tracking water among voters and what voters think about water for the last 5 or 6 years. What surprised us this year was water is now the top issue in the state. It's 4 points ahead of what's typically in the top: immigration, education, inflation. Mojave, the 4 counties again passed resolutions just in the last month urging passage of the bill. Attorney General Mays sends a letter to DWR asking why they aren't doing periodic reviews of basins to see which ones qualify for new AMAs, and then she rescinded 2 drill cards in La Paz County. Same month, April, 127 residents in the Wilcox Basin wrote a letter to the governor and DWR asking them to take executive action to designate the basin a new INA because they need something. Again, final state budget, $5 million for new AMAs, and then this new Water Policy Council that's being convened, and there's a Rural Groundwater Management Committee that's tasked with making recommendations for legislation by December. So that wraps up the storyline of how communities have been engaging on rural groundwater in recent years. And then the main takeaway is it's been increasing and it's been a lot, and that's going to continue over time until rural communities are given more options and tools that are a better fit to protect the water in ways that they see as fit and according to their local goals. And so I'm going to get into a little bit of the legislative proposal that was introduced and then amended last year. It did not pass. It's not going to pass this year, but work is going to continue on it, and I expect it will be introduced again last year. So this was the local groundwater management stewardship area proposal. And I'll say from the beginning, I'm not here promoting this. I'm just going to represent what the bill is, what was worked on by dozens of communities throughout the state, and then open an invitation for you all and anyone who's listening, if you'd like to get engaged in this conversation, regardless of your views, certainly would encourage you to do so, because this is only going to get ramped up over time. So the purpose of the bill, a few principles going into it was: one, expand the toolbox for rural communities with options to create locally tailored basin level solutions. This is pretty different from the active management areas and AMA approach, because once a new AMA is instituted, everything that comes with an AMA automatically applies. There's no local tailoring in an AMA program. Opt-in, flexible approach. So not only make the new program opt-in, but also the different tools, management actions, make those selectable by local communities. Third principle, dedicated funding. In an AMA and INA, there is no dedicated funding. What was important for rural communities is if there's going to be a new, better option, that should come with funding to actually do conservation programs, do incentives, things like that. And that was another major focus, really focus on voluntary conservation programs and incentives that can be customized in a local planning process at the basin level in rural Arizona. And then the last principle that went into the crafting of the bill is promote the shared stability of groundwater supplies, because everybody uses the same supply if you're in a basin, and if you're in rural Arizona, that is typically and most often the only supply available. So create value and opportunities for all users that depend on that supply. Key differences with AMAs and INAs, I mentioned some of these. So one, stewardship area dedicated funding, $50 million a year for implementation. What's key here, no new taxes, no fees. So the state, DWR, only has authority for new fees within the AMA, INA framework. Because we're not working in that framework, no new fees would come with that. So that $50 million in the legislation, the way it's crafted is it's money that's over and above existing obligations in the lottery fund. Another principle, temporary. Get a new AMA or new INA, it's there forever. One of the ideas that rural Arizona liked in this proposal was have it be a 10-year program, and then have there be a review by DWR that's driven by science and criteria, so that the program, if the criteria are no longer, if the criteria are being met, the reason for the designation, there would be a pathway to rescind the program. So this was important for a number of rural communities. Balanced local control with state support, another principle in the bill. So again, an AMA, if you imagine a spectrum of state control, local control, an AMA is pretty much all the way over on state control. What this proposal would do is it moves the ball more towards local communities, sets up a local council, and the council would have the authority to pick and choose from a pre-authorized set of management actions, so like well spacing, conservation program, incentive program, things like that. Pick what they want, put that in the management plan. DWR is responsible to implement it. So there's more of a balance between locals get to make the choice, DWR, technical expertise, resources to implement. Flexible, I mentioned this, mix and match tools to meet local needs. If one particular tool isn't needed, then locals shouldn't have to do that tool like they would in an AMA. So precise, the ability to do things at the basin or sub-basin level, depending on how this or where this is designated, it would enable that versus doing things in like a county-wide approach. And then rural economic development catalyst, compared to an AMA or INA with the dedicated funding, conservation program, incentives program, the idea would be to get those resources on the ground to support water users and communities and provide value and jumpstart rural economic development. So key differences with what exists now as options for rural Arizona versus what could exist or what has been worked on by communities over the last few years and is continuing to be worked on. So key features, walk through the process really, really quick. So there would be a science-based, criteria-driven designation process. This could be initiated in 3 ways. The 3 ways it could be initiated are pretty similar to the AMA and INA approach, because the idea would be, if we want to provide a better, more flexible option for rural Arizona, let's not make it more difficult than doing the worst options for rural Arizona. So it can be initiated either by 10% of voters petitioning DWR. That's exactly what they can do now to get a new INA. It can be initiated by the DWR director. The DWR director can do that on his own right now for a new AMA. So the idea would be to give him another option. Or, and here's what's new for counties in this program compared to AMAs, would be a county board of supervisors could petition the DWR director to initiate one of these. Following a petition, DWR would follow a public hearing process. Again, the criteria are defined on the bill, and they would make a determination. It would be an appealable agency action, and if it proceeds, one of these would be designated. Then a council would be set up. This is something that changed. The council makeup changed in the introduced version of the bill versus the amended version of the bill. The amended version of the bill, the council appointment process reflects, it's sort of similar to what the legislature did for WIFA last year. County Board of Supervisors would get to appoint 2 seats. The legislature would get 4, governor 3, expertise criteria, and then 6 of the 9 have to reside in the stewardship area. The reason 3 don't have to would be scenarios where, like if there's a ranch, might have significant operations within the basin, but the rancher might live outside. This is also a consideration for mining companies as well. Management plan contents, the bill would then define a set of selectable options. So like well spacing, conservation program, recharge and recovery program, incentives program, and then the council could choose what to put into the management plan. They set the goal. They don't have to choose really anything, but they can. So the idea would be to give choice, move choice to the local basins, and then the plan then goes to DWR for approval and implementation and tracking, and then implementation of the plan, dedicated funding to do that, and then every 10 years goes through the review process. So of course, a lot more to be worked out, or a lot more to be discussed in details, but don't need to do that today. And I'm happy to sit down with anyone and meet with the amended version of the bill. I actually do have copies of the amended version on a USB. I'm happy to give that to the county, along with the resolutions, the resolution that was passed by Mojave County. If you all want to see that, I have a copy of that as well. So that's a quick summary of the bill. So where we are now, to wrap this up quickly, to reiterate, the underlying framework for groundwater management in rural Arizona is nothing. You know, when my family moved here in 1980, it was probably fine. Now there's 1.5 million people here. We have a number of growing areas, and then of course with the water challenges we face, a number of communities no longer see nothing as a viable option. Also, want to point out here that rural Arizona, we're the last place in the Colorado River Basin, the entire basin, where it's still open access, free-for-all groundwater pumping. Water is the #1 issue now with voters statewide, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, don't care. What we increasingly see in our polling is it's just going up in terms of importance and what voters care about. Colorado River, because when we're looking at water statewide, it all intersects. We likely have about a 2-year window heading up into 2026 to prepare for less Colorado River water deliveries. That's only going to have the effect of increasing reliance on groundwater throughout the state. That matters because when companies look to relocate or look to invest in Arizona, they're looking at the entire water supply portfolio. They want to know, does the state have everything in order before they make a substantial investment? We're starting to see more of those sorts of questions too. We went through this extensively, but more and more rural leaders, communities are seeking to be empowered when it comes to making choices about their water, because ultimately, without water, there is no future in rural Arizona. And so it's really about the freedom to make choices about the future, and more communities are starting to understand that and see that, and as a result are getting engaged on these sorts of challenges. And so I'll wrap up just by saying, again, this is, I really appreciate the invitation to come here, talk about water from a bigger statewide perspective, especially what's happening out in greater and rural Arizona. And in return, I'll extend the invitation back to you all and anyone who's listening, regardless of your views on management or not. These are important issues, and would encourage you to track at a minimum, and if you'd like, join the conversation, and happy to keep talking. And lastly, this is my email and my cell. Reach out anytime.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And so questions? Supervisor Humphrey, comments, questions?
Not any questions. I'm just happy to see that there's a lot more bills coming in front of the state to try to make some better decisions for our future. And I'd also like to see the counties have more say-so in what goes on with our water in rural Arizona, rather than some of the larger cities making all the decisions for us when it comes to voting. So, yeah, it's difficult, especially now with all the infrastructure and rural Arizona is growing. Then the water needs are a lot more, and people with private wells are worried that development is going to get a longer straw than they have, and they're going to be without water. So it's good to see things are starting to shake. I just hope it's not too little too late. I hope there's still time to get a handle on a lot of these things and better use of our water. But thank you very much for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Christensen.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chris, for the presentation. I do have a few questions. Comment first. I grew up in Douglas, and so did my wife, and my sister-in-law lives in Elfrida. She just spent $22,000 drilling her well deeper. So we've seen a lot in the Sulphur Springs Valley, just pecan orchards, just incredible the amount of stuff they're growing there now versus when I grew up. There was a few peach orchards and stuff, but now there's big dairy farms, and they are pumping a lot of water there. So maybe the AMA makes sense to them. We did have a discussion a while ago whether an AMA work in Gila County, and we just felt it was too restricting. It's not really what Gila County needs. So it's intriguing to see this new concept here with the local stewardship idea. So when I look at a place like up in my district, like Pine and Strawberry, which you mentioned actually in one of your slides, there's a targeted area that struggles with water supply. There is no large users there. You know, there's no big giant orchards or agricultural or livestock uses there. So I wonder if a local stewardship area was developed there, what would be the advantage of it when the water supply is just limited because it's limited to start with, not being harvested by industry?
Right, great question. And so one of the underlying concepts of the stewardship area, which certainly came from a number of residents in areas that don't necessarily have large new users coming in but still face challenges, is it's still important to create that environment where we can invest in locals' water security. And so by creating a program that can have different tailorable options, a number of the tools may not be needed, like say for example a well spacing tool may not be needed in Pine Strawberry like it would be in Wilcox, but in that case then that tool wouldn't go into the management plan. You'd still want to have other things available like a conservation program or an incentives program, because that would then link to significant funding in order to support infrastructure, different projects, and recharge and recovery. And so what one of the things we saw last year, and I actually forgot to mention the new WIFA, the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority bill that passed last year, is there significant money available or that could be available to invest in rural community water supply infrastructure, conservation, incentives, and things like that. The issue is in basins where there's no underlying protection, the challenge is then, is that something the state can invest in while still being fiscally responsible and being responsive to taxpayers? So like say if we spend money, public money on recharge, but we can't ultimately protect that water, it could be sucked out or it could not, it might not result in the public benefit it was intended. And so by creating some level of protection that fits local communities, it opens the door for significant public investment. And so in the Pine Strawberry area, having some basin or sub-basin level program that could provide that planning framework would significantly open the door to new resources that they don't currently have access to.
Okay, so that's interesting. And I do like the permissive aspect of it, providing an opt-in, opt-out. We do it, we don't do it, whatever we want. So, so when it comes to opting in or opting out, is that a region or are those specific properties? Let's say a rancher doesn't want to be involved in the program, but everything around him is. Is that an opt-in or opt-out, or is it just at the county level it's an opt-in or opt-out?
There's in the way the draft legislation or the concept is constructed now, there's multiple levels of the opt-in or opt-out. So the first opt-in would be, do we create a stewardship area or not? And then what basin or sub-basin? So that's the first opt-in question. And one of the things that could, like this could apply to sub-basin. So it doesn't need to be a huge area. It can be precise and targeted to where there are challenges. So once it's created, that's the first opt-in choice. And then what's unique about the stewardship area approach compared to what we have now is the management plan itself is an opt-in process. So to contrast with the Douglas AMA, right now, DWR is setting the goal, and then they're going to implement all the programs that come with the AMA, I think by 2027. And there's not going to be any sort of like, well, we don't need this program, we do need that, and so you can't tailor the AMA. So in the stewardship area, the bill defines a set of actions or tools, and you can opt into all or none of those, essentially. There's no actual requirement you must do these tools. The council has to decide what's the best fit. So it's very customizable.
Okay, and do the people vote on this, the people of the county, or does the Board of Supervisors just vote on it?
So the Board of Supervisors would appoint 2 members to the council, and then the council itself, that would be the body that makes the choices of what goes into the management plan, and then DWR would implement the management plan.
Okay, all right, thanks, Chris.
And that's what changed. I should mention too, the introduced version and the amended version, there was a change in the role of the Board of Supervisors in the opt-in process, in the designation process. So in the introduced version of the bill, there was 2 designation processes, one at DWR and then one at the county, at the Board of Supervisors level if the county wanted to do it themselves. But the feedback we got from counties and from water stakeholders is that let's just simplify this, make it one process that DWR manages because they have the technical expertise and the resources to evaluate those sorts of things, and instead allow the Board of Supervisors to petition DWR to initiate the process. So it simplified that front end quite a bit compared to the introduced version.
So I know we need to look at our water issues, absolutely, and it's a very important topic that we need to discuss. But we're essentially asking the public to transition from the sort of an individual right when it comes to water to more of a, what I call, I guess, a collective good kind of concept. And to some people, that's a bit of a struggle to get to that point where you're okay, we have a shared groundwater supply. Now we all have to be governed by a group that's going to decide whether I'm overusing or not. And so that's a struggle right there.
It is,
Yeah.
and I'm from rural Arizona. I still live in rural Arizona, and I get that. And I think And what I've increasingly seen in conversations with rural communities is the recognition that if I have a house and I have a well, and suddenly my well goes dry and there's nothing that can be done about it, that's not freedom. That's no longer freedom. And we're increasingly seeing that mindset throughout the state. And so the idea is what we can do is we can work on crafting new ideas and new programs that, one, it's really important to respect private property rights. And not only can we respect them through addressing groundwater challenges, but we can actually enhance private property rights. Because ultimately, if our groundwater that we all use is stable, that benefits everyone's private property that depends on that water. Otherwise, that value of that property is just going to go down as the aquifer goes down. And so trying to craft a program that can respect private property rights and that enables choice and the ability to self-determine what tools rural Arizona wants to use is also really important. And so I think incorporating those values that we care deeply about into a new approach is something that a number of communities that worked on this proposal have intended or attempted to do.
Right, good. Thanks, Chris. That's all I have.
Appreciate it.
Chris, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I have real big issues with a lot of it. So, water has been an issue and a discussion since I was a very little kid. You know, we live in a rural desert type setting, and so it's always been an issue. Arizona Department of Water Resources are in charge basically for regulating our groundwater. They're the ones that provide permits. Like if I want to go drill a well in my backyard, I pay them $100 and I apply for an application, and they either give it to me or they don't. If it's over the 35 gallon a minute, then it's up to them. You know, that's when you're getting into the farming and the irrigation and stuff like that. My biggest thing forever is that private property rights are very, very important to me. The other thing that I see, and you didn't talk much about it in this presentation, is we never mentioned Maricopa County or Pinal County and these really large counties that are growing extremely fast. They're not shutting down building swimming pools, and they're still building golf courses, and they're still building town lakes, and they're doing all this at the expense that I feel like, me personally, at the expense of us rural people. And so to me, quite honestly, until there's a discussion with expansion and growth and just how much is this desert going to hold, I'll never be for any kind of legislation on dictating how much water somebody will take out of their backyard well. And so, and regardless of what they say and the direction it goes, if it comes to the legislatures, there will be meters on our wells in our backyards that will measure and probably charge for the water that comes out of our wells. I will never be for that, ever. And so my biggest thing is until there's that discussion on population and growth and where this state is going to go with that, the rest of it's a non-issue to me. And so that's just where I'm at, and I really do appreciate your presentation. It's always good to hear ideas, whether I agree with them or not. So thank you for being here today.
Yeah, glad to be here, and I think hearing all the diversity and different ideas, it's what's important, and it's ultimately what's needed if we are going to craft better options for rural communities that want better options. And ultimately, if there are some rural communities that don't need any other tool, then I think they're just fine. In response to the state, so with DWR, one of the things with the new program would be in the metering and measuring conversation would be, rather than leaving that up to the state, one option to consider would be putting that in the hands of the locals. So put that as an option that's available in a locally driven management planning process, so that if there are locals in a basin or sub-basin that want to do measuring and reporting for larger wells, that's their choice versus leaving it up to the state. And so that's something to consider when it comes to where the decisions being made. If the decisions are only being made at the state level, then I think I think you're going to be right, Supervisor Klein. But if we can come up with a better option that takes the choices and moves it to the local level, that puts communities in the driver's seat of those choices.
So one thing I don't want anybody to be confused is I don't disagree that there's an issue with water in the state of Arizona. We have an issue. We've had some really, really dry years. You know, a lot of the focus has been on farmers or producers, you know, and the amount of water that they take. But when you look at that, Chris, those people have been cut back because of development. We've lost so much in the way of farm ground in our valleys. I don't know what the percentages are, I couldn't tell you, but it's way less than what we used to have. And today, they're getting cut back even more. And so what's taken that place is homes and swimming pools and golf courses. Now, when it comes to the rural communities, that's an interesting thought, is because we have a lot of rural communities. They're not incorporated. There's no districts other than us as a county. There's some water districts in some of them, where we have water districts that kind of regulate the water. There's times when I sit there and I think, you know, water's gonna get a little tight, sure, but we still have boards that are giving us certificates for a 100-year water supply. So that puts us in a corner where, yeah, we're not the water experts. These people are saying they can produce the water so that there's another development or another subdivision or whatever going in there. That can happen, they can do that, you know, and we look at that. But really and truly, my biggest thing is when it comes to the rural communities, we need to turn our focus around to the larger communities. And we really need to focus on what they're taking out of our water supplies. It's not necessarily your rural areas, so.
Right.
Thank you.
And I agree, it's a shared statewide issue on water, because once that CAP canal starts to go down or goes less, we're going to start to see some significant groundwater challenges in the central part of the state. So it's really a whole state perspective that I think is good. But I appreciate the comments, Supervisor.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, moving on to the next one, information discussion regarding vacation rentals by owner in Gila County, and that's mine. But I did solicit some help today. So we have Michelle Nelson in Payson. We've had this discussion once already. And since then, I've been to town hall meetings and other meetings where I continually hear the issues on short-term rentals. So me and Michelle had a discussion. There are some platforms out there that a lot of the short-term rental folks go through and are a part of. And so I've invited her here today to kind of talk about that and give us a chance to ask some questions. So Michelle, are you ready?
Sure am. Thank you so much, Supervisor Klein.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for giving me, a short-term rental owner, a voice in your deliberations. That was lacking in the town of Payson's deliberations, and since they passed their ordinance, I know of one resident, she's a retiree. She has a husband who had a stroke, and she was had a little in their backyard, very restricted on property, and she was, fixing up her house with that extra money she received. She's reported to me that she's now going to have to go out of her home and leave her husband alone because she has to go find a part-time job. So I'm glad that you've given me this opportunity, because we've seen a difference in my community, East Verde Park. So I'm here today to tell you how the county can solve the noise, traffic, and trash problems created by the short-term rentals without any liability or cost. And how can I say this? Because it's happened in my community, East Verde Park. And I do have this PowerPoint up. It is not relevant at this time. I'm just going to talk to you about what kind of happened in my community first. 1 year ago, I faced 40 community members basically with pitchforks and Molotov cocktails ready to burn my house down, and anyone else who had a short-term rental. They were so upset with the noise, traffic, and trash. But 1 year after giving my community members the information I'll give you today, we live in a mostly peaceful community, but this is Gila County, is anywhere really peaceful. Verla Doctor, our VP of the association, because we have an association for East Verde Park, she and I got together, we're both short-term rentals owners. And we found out that the portals, Airbnb and VRBO, have very strong ways of filing complaints. And the reason we know this is that it worked with our neighbor. And by the way, 98% of short-term rentals we've found are either on Airbnb or VRBO. So last year's meeting, I'm skipping through a bunch of stuff that I was going to say that I don't need to say. So my owner and I live next to a short-term rental that the owner is in Phoenix. He's more than an hour away, and for some reason, he always got big groups, big, loud groups. And me and my husband, we tolerated the music in our backyard, but the noise went right into my neighbor's yard. And after last year's Memorial Day annual meeting, armed with the information on the complaints, she went and filed a complaint. The problem was solved within hours, but I'd like you to tell it in her own words. We were once again troubled by loud, drunken yelling and fighting last night by the short-term guests to the northeast of us, so I filed a complaint with the Airbnb and the host. I'm not sure when these people were scheduled to depart, but I got multiple emails back last night and today from the host and Airbnb that they were looking into, and then finally that the guests would check out this morning. I think that the complaint process is fairly simple and effective. It is valuable to make complaints when necessary so that neighbors feel like they are empowered to take action and that hosts who are negligent are put on notice. That also helps hosts who are being good neighbors
You're having a hard
not
time?
get
So,
bad rap
hey,
because of
Michelle, if I could interrupt you for just a minute, we're having some really bad background noise here on our end.
Sure.
Now it's gone.
Can we do a test here? How does this sound? Background feedback?
That's a lot better. You
All right,
good,
I'm going to
Sam?
I'll repeat what my neighbor said because it's really important.
Would you please?
Yes. So my neighbor wrote this. She said, "We were once again troubled by loud, drunken yelling and fighting last night by the short-term guests to the northeast of us. So I filed a complaint with Airbnb and the host. I'm not sure when those people were scheduled to depart, but I got multiple emails back last night and today from the host and Airbnb that they were looking into, and then finally that the guests would check out this morning. I think that the complaint process is fairly simple and effective. It is valuable to make complaints when necessary so that neighbors feel like they are empowered to take action and that hosts who are negligent are put on notice. That also helps hosts who are being good neighbors not get a bad rap because of others." My neighbor put together a presentation, and others in the community used this presentation to file complaints. They reported trash picked up immediately after complaining for months. Complaints converted one house into a full-time rental, and the owner behind me, no longer do guests play loud music or disturb my peace. The county's IT department has the PowerPoint from my neighbor, but the graphics are old. I've asked if the IT department to share a screen with us also we can walk you through how easy it is to file a complaint online with Airbnb. But if the PowerPoint works better, we can work with that too.
I think we're good to go, aren't we, Joseph? Yeah, we're good to go, Michelle.
So we're going to go with the PowerPoint then?
Yeah.
Great. So go to the next slide, please. So what you're going to do first when you file a complaint is you're going to search for Airbnb. Don't do what my husband did and click on a link that doesn't have the logo, the official logo. It'll take you down a dark place. So if we go to the next slide. So what you're going to do is go online and search for the Airbnb link. You'll click on the website, and then you're going to go search for the house you're looking for. And if we can go to the next slide, I think it'll show us how we start looking like that. Okay, so keep going. These are the websites. These are the links. So when you search for a site, so this is the landing page when you go to Airbnb. I'm not real comfortable with VRBO, but the complaint process is very similar. So if you'll notice what's going on here, you're going to be searching for an area. She typed in Payson, Arizona. And then on there, it also asks for dates, but it says flexible. And you can see that, it's hard for me to even see it, but it's on there. It says flexible, you can type that. And then I picked week, and then if you go to the next slide. Well, in this case, she went to East Verde Parks in particular, and it shows all of the listings by price. So you can figure out from that, or you can figure out from just scrolling through which house looks like the one you want to file a complaint about. And if you go to the next slide, please. You can verify that this is the home you're ready to complain about. And if you notice, she said you can copy the link from the address bar up there. It's an important step to take. And if we'll go to the next one, she showed us how to share the link. It's a different way to do it, more technology than I want to use, but it's possible. If we go to the next slide, please. This is at the bottom of the page. You can either contact the host directly through their listing, or you can scroll all the way to the bottom of the page of the property. So in this case, she's notifying the host, being a nice person, and sending them directly a message. If we go to the next slide, please. You know, the next, this is like making a complaint. When you go to the bottom of the listing on Airbnb, way at the bottom, it says make a complaint regarding this property, and you can click on that, which is she's reported neighborhood concern. You click on that. If you can go to the next slide, please. This is where it's a different looking page now. They don't have quite pretty graphics. It's even more simple. It actually nowadays, it has two options. You can report an urgent concern and request a phone call back immediately, or you can go online and use that copied link you have to file a complaint. If we can go to the next slide, please. There's also a phone number up there for people who don't have online access. This is starting the neighborhood support. This is what my neighbor used. She used the online portal and got the emails back immediately. That's where you need to put in the copy of the link of the address. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. This is also making a complaint, how you can do it, the options available. It'll walk you through. Next slide, please. Unless that's the last one. And this is more of how it looks. So it's basically filling it in, making sure you have the right place, and then sending it off. And is there one final slide? I think that's it. And then you wait, and as my neighbor said, they got back to her a lot faster than she was surprised. And Airbnb and VRBO have been responding to these complaints quickly. So I like to say, here's my suggestion. I suggest you spend the next year and run an experiment. Educate the community on the complaint process. When you get a complaint, give them a handout on the process for the two big platforms. Train your deputies on how to file a complaint when they get a call, or even get your dispatchers to tell people about the complaint process and give out the phone number. I'm betting this will quickly solve many of the problems with little cost to the county. Remember, the platforms can shut down a problem rental overnight, and the rental owners are a lot more worried about losing their listing than about a county code enforcement officer. Access to the platform allows the business to exist. I have 1,000 eyeballs looking at my place every month. I can't replicate that market reach on my own, nor can I replicate the banking and scheduling function of the platform. In short, without the platform, I don't have a business. Moreover, the county can empower residents to solve the problem immediately. The deputies or the dispatchers can be on-the-spot heroes. Using the platform's complaint process also protects the county from liability. That's something Supervisor Klein raised at the last meeting you discussed short-term rentals. The platforms also save county staff time and effort, keeping a registry, contacting owners, paperwork, and enforcement, and protects them against liability too. Already in pace in the regulation they've passed, it's caused problems. But I think that the county can do this and make it a lot less effort for everyone and get us all, we can all be better neighbors like we are in East Verde Park. Because wouldn't you rather empower neighbors and solve problems quickly than add more regulations, staff, and burdens for the hearing officers? So try it for a year and see if it works. And if it doesn't, you can always add costs, hire more staff, and take on the responsibility of policing hundreds of short-term rental units yourself. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Michelle, before I turn it over to some more questions, there's one thing that me and you did discuss, and that is the people that are not a part of those platforms, that are not subscribed to Airbnb and VRBO. And I've kind of watched a little bit more since I've spoken to you about that. There are quite a few of those. So how, in your mind, how would that work?
Well, according to research, Woody, I'm just telling you, research shows that 98% of people are using these two platforms for their business because it's so easy. I have heard, I have two, let's see, we have 170 lots in East Verde Park, 140 have homes on them. We have about 30 of those that are short-term rentals that we know of. Only 2 out of those 30 that are ones we know of that are off the platform. That's only 2 out of 30 in our home. If you go online and you look at, and I'm not sure if your staff has done this, looked at how many rentals are on VRBO and Airbnb. I know the town of Payson did this and reported the same findings. I found that 98% of these short-term rentals are on. So 98% are on the platforms. And so today, just today, you could give out that phone number that my neighbor put on there to your deputies and to your dispatch, and I promise you today that you could start solving this problem with 98% of your short-term rentals. You won't solve all the problems, but I do know that the neighbors that have a short-term rental, it's for hospital, for the nurses, they often overwhelm their septic system. They have gray water running onto their neighbors' houses. You, the county, already have laws regarding health and safety, regarding septic tanks. So that is a very strong way. In fact, I had a complaint early on in mine, and I had to spend $20,000 to upgrade my septic, which I was happy to do because I'm a good neighbor. But you already have on the books this ability to control houses that are not on the platform through the septic. If they are overstraining their septic system, that is a public health issue.
Okay, Michelle, thank you. Thank you for all
Sure.
this, and I'm going to open it up for questions. Supervisor Humphrey, questions or comments?
No, I'm pretty much good. There's been a lot of complaints on some of them in my district, and I guess I will get that information to give my constituents a job. They'll call me for help, and I'll say, well, here's a number, you can help yourself. That kind of doesn't go over too well either, but it's worth a try. But yeah, but the regulations from the parking, from the overcrowded people, and some of those issues are most of the complaints that I get. And I'm not against short-term rentals. I think they're good for people that travel. I think they're good for people passing through the state. I'm even entertaining some of my property for people that are traveling with horses to have a short-term place where they could stay. And so I'm not against them, but I think, and if some of these outfits with the platforms are, if they're starting to regulate their own people, well, great, because there has to be some regulation on these because there's been so many complaints. And so I appreciate the information that you've given today. It'll be beneficial. And as far as whether SO will use it or can use it, that would be up to the sheriff, not the Board of Supervisors. But that information will be good information that we can share with some of the communities. So thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Christensen.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle, for coming. And good to see you. And we have spoken many times ourselves about this, and I do believe that you could be very much so put in the category of a good host, a good owner, a good business person with regard to it. And so anytime we consider a regulation or an ordinance, anything like that, it's not because of the good ones, it's because of the ones that are not so good. And so the complaint process that you're describing is very powerful and very useful, and I understand very effective. And I have passed that information on to the Sheriff's Department, and I'm hoping that they're utilizing that information because it cuts down on the amount of work that they need to do. Because when they show up to a house that has 10 people in it, you know, they don't know who they're supposed to write a ticket to. And so it just becomes an issue. But if they can contact the owner now, it's very helpful. Now, now I know and I get the sense that you're against any additional regulation or ordinance from the county. But as was mentioned, the few that are not part of this system, the Verbo and Airbnb system, that would come in. I think the county, it would be wise for us to have a database of all those who are operating, especially in the north. We have hundreds and hundreds up there in the north of, and you're one of them, that's in the north there. And so we have hundreds and hundreds. Maybe we're aware, maybe we're not aware. And so having that database or having a permit system or having a license makes a little bit of sense. And so I do very much, though, appreciate your input in that as a counter alternative, and with the idea that we try it for a little while and see. We have not received back from those that are developing this ordinance. We don't know the progress, or I don't know the project, I guess, on that at the moment. So I don't know where I stand on that. So, but I do thank you, Michelle. Do you have any questions for me?
Actually, I do. In Payson, are you guys considering two separate ordinances? Because in Payson, they had the disturbing properties ordinance, which affected all owners, full-time, short-term rentals, full-time rentals. In other words, Payson is starting to really crack down because they have drug houses that have been there way before short-term rentals ever started. And I've heard from the Payson police that they often go to the same property over and over again because that property has parties, even without short-term rentals. And so Payson decided to split the two up. I don't know if you're considering that. The licensing part of it probably will actually create a problem for me and the people in East Verde Park because we share a zip code with Payson. Although we do not receive any law enforcement, we're probably going to have to go discuss with Airbnb because I'm not paying two licensing fees to the county and to the town when I don't receive any law enforcement from them. So there are consequences to doing this that really make it a lot harder for the small business owner. And frankly, with today's inflation and difficulty just in running business, I would hope that you would also consider that we bring in millions of dollars in sales taxes, short-term rentals. And you shut down this business, you've shut down a sales tax revenue. So just please be conscious and aware. If you want to control the noise, traffic, and trash for short-term rentals, by the Constitution, you must do it for all the community. So I'm wondering if that's what's happening with you guys, if you're considering that or not.
Well, I know personally I have no intention in shutting down the business, the resource. It's those that we receive, neighbors that complain about something and don't feel that they have any resource to take care of it. So we're looking at the best thing without being heavy-handed. In my opinion, we should not be heavy-handed. We're not trying to eliminate the whole concept. I believe that it's great that we have them, but they need to be good neighbors like you are.
I agree completely, and that's why this complaint process I brought to you really has empowered the neighbors at East Verde Park. And I know through my title company, I know from the sheriff's office that East Verde Park has a reputation for being a little ornery, more ornery than a lot of other places. And we have, it really has empowered our community and brought peace to our community. And honestly, as a resident of Gila County, that's why I love living here. I love community. And I love having the peace and quiet and people who respect the nature and listening to the birds. And so I feel happy as a person who lives full time that I have this complaint process for my neighbors. And I'm happy that it's turned things around. Trouble houses that were houses are gone. So I really hope that this information gets out to those people who are talking to the residents who are complaining about, especially like that couple up in Whispering Pines. I could not believe what they've had to put up with. I hope that the county has gone to that little house next to them and shut them down, because it is a public health hazard how many people they have going there in their septic. So I really would like to, this summer, see this complaint process spread far and wide. If you guys have any ideas on how I can help to spread it far and wide and who I can talk to, because ultimately that's what I really want, peace and quiet, and I want communities that get along.
Thank you, Michelle.
Michelle, thank you. Jessica, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Okay, so Michelle's saying 98% of short-term rentals are already a part of Airbnb or VRBO. So let's just say that 2% is out on its own, doing their own thing. Any ideas or suggestions how a county could or couldn't make them be a part of a Airbnb or VRBO?
You're asking for leverage over people who are not part of the platforms, is that what you're asking?
I'm asking a way of getting everybody on a platform that would have, so that we could utilize this complaint process more. I know what Michelle's saying by statistics, but I honestly feel like there's a lot more than that isn't on an Airbnb or a VRBO platform.
Well, that kind of runs into a problem with like full-time renters, doesn't it? Because I understand the state doesn't have any registration or laws for people who give full-time, rent to full-time.
I don't know. That's why I was asking Jessica what it would be, or if there's even an option for something like that.
Chairman, member supervisors, so with the new legislation, the county has the ability to enact ordinance to basically combat any sort of health or safety or nuisance or what have you. We could look into that specifically to see if the county would have the ability to, as part of the ordinance, require these short-term rentals to be a part of one of those platforms so that they could further the health, the safety, the nuisance, what have you. So we can certainly look into that and explore it a little bit more.
I would really be interested in seeing what's out there and what could happen with that, just to see, more information for us. So
Certainly makes the registry a lot easier. The owners are very interested in making sure the platforms has their most up-to-date information. I know that I believe the city of Tempe has had a registration as well, and they've reported real struggles keeping that list up to date. I know that personally here in Gila County, I'm working with Payson Police, Fire, Community Bridges, and others. We're trying to create an emergency 988 number, because the 988 number for mental health and crises doesn't work here because of the way they've scheduled it with area codes. It's a complicated, plus we don't have any resources. We do have resources, but they're complicated. It's hard to get together. And just making a list of all the resources that are available to help has been a monumental task. So the registry is already on the platforms, done. Most up-to-date contact information, they know where that owner is, they can get to them in a minute. So I don't think that the county can ever replace that. Just an FYI, just don't think that's possible.
no, but really my question was how do we make the other ones use that? You see what I'm saying?
I'm wondering if that's possible. I don't know how far the law goes, but that's kind of, to me, a personal choice for a business. And I'm not sure if you can, like, if you've got a business to, I don't know, you could have that. I don't know. It certainly would simplify your problem.
I'm interested to see what you find out, Jessica. So.
Yes, Chairman, member supervisors. So the statute is pretty open. It does seem that it would allow you to do that. There's not going to be any sort of case law out there. So I could explore it a little bit more, but I think that would be something that could work to require the short-term rentals to be a part of one of those platforms. That way there is a complaint-based setup, that would further the ordinance of protecting the health and safety of the community. There's other specifications that you can add in there. So yeah, absolutely. I'll get back to you, Chairman, and I'll let you know what we find.
Thank you, Jessica. And any other questions or comments? You guys good?
I'm good, thank you.
Michelle, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate your input.
Well, I really, really appreciate how you guys are handling this and getting all the information and letting the owner's constituency be heard. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, on to C, information discussion regarding funds in support of the Payson Senior Center. Steve?
Yes, thank you. So today we have two representatives from the Board of Directors of the Payson Senior Center. Do a lot of work in northern Arizona. They're here to present what they do now and what their goals are for the future. We have Debbie Stevens and Chris Dock, if you would.
So, do you need them to state their name and address again, or are you good, Sam?
First and last name.
There you go. First and last name, please.
Okay. Hello, my name is Debbie Steffens, and I'm with the Payson Senior Center. And thank you for the opportunity and the privilege to be before you in this presentation. Thank you. Imagine losing the one person in your life that cares for you, the one person that made sure you had food to eat and a place to stay. That's what happened to Rose, one of our seniors in our community. Rose's sister, who was also her full-time caregiver, had sadly passed away. For 2 whole weeks, Rose sat in her empty house, mourning the loss of her sister, while facing the reality that she could not care for herself on her own. So when what little food in her house ran out, she made a desperate call to the Payson Senior Center. Our director at that time answered the phone and heard Rose's weak, shaken voice say this: "Please help me, I'm starving to death." Rose was immediately put on our Meals on Wheels program, and that program saved her life. I know personally what it takes to care for an elderly, as my husband and I became full-time caregivers for his dad, who was diagnosed with Lewy bodies dementia, which is equivalent to having Parkinson's, schizophrenia, and Alzheimer's all in one. And it was during that time of caring for Papa Charlie, loving on him, providing him with food and shelter and as much family love as we could give him, that my heart really began to ache for the seniors and elderly in our community. So many of them are without family or friends, and they're facing the challenges of aging alone. And that's when my passion for our programs and our services really became apparent to me. It's critical that we exist in our community. We've been serving these communities since 1985. Back in 1985, there was a population of around 7,000 in our community. We were founded by a group of women who realized there was a need in the community to help the homebound and the elderly and have a place where seniors could come together and have resources and make friendships and have lunch together. I was told that some of those founders even mortgaged their homes to purchase the property that we currently have on Main Street. I had the utmost privilege of meeting one of those founders. Her name was Rosalind. We called her Rose. My first day meeting her about 7 years ago when I started at the center, she was sitting in the dining hall with gloves on, rolling silverware, getting ready for the lunch. She was in her late 90s and was still giving to the mission that she helped found. I felt very humbled and honored and privileged to be able to take her legacy and her torch and carry it on to hopefully have a place where seniors for generations to come would have these resources. Last fiscal year, we served over 7,000 meals in our center. Most of these people, this is the only meal of the day that they get. They count on us for their nutrition and for friendship and connections. We also served over 38,000 meals on our Meals on Wheels program. One of our homebound described this program as luxury. That really hit my heart hard for him to describe getting one meal a day as luxury. But when you're hungry and you would otherwise go without, that's exactly what it is to them. It's a luxury. We also made over 3,600 transportation trips to take people to go grocery shopping, medical appointments, and to the center, of course, for lunch. I had taken the phone call and it was Bonnie. Bonnie and her husband are in their late 80s. Bonnie is legally blind, and unfortunately her husband, who usually does the driving and makes sure that they had food to eat, had taken a serious fall that required surgery. He was now laying in a wheelchair that was slanted due to his injuries. She called the center panicking because she didn't know how they were going to get groceries in. They were almost out of food, how she would get him to his medical appointment. I was able to calm her down immediately and let her know that we had a vehicle that would able to him stay in his wheelchair and take him to his medical appointment and get her grocery shopping so they would have food to eat. By the end of the conversation, she was crying and I was crying because she says, "You've given me hope. hope that we're going to be okay. She says, we don't have any family and our friends have all passed away. We are completely alone. I was able to calm her and tell her, you're not alone now. You have a family called the Payson Senior Center. Our tagline is embracing life together, and that's exactly what we do. We're not just a restaurant or a concierge service or have these programs. We actually invest into the lives of the people that we serve. They're personally, to me, they're all Papa Charlies out there that need some support and some family. This is Michael. Michael's the first person that we pick up on our transportation program, and we bring him to the center where he'll hang out until his lunchtime. Every year we do surveys to make sure that we're meeting the needs, the current needs of our community and our seniors. Every couple years, we do what we call an impact survey to see what it means to the people that we serve to have these programs. And this is Michael's survey, his answers. We asked 3 questions. The first question we asked is, what does coming to the center mean to you? His very first answer to that on the first line is good nutritional lunches that are well balanced. He goes on to say great fellowship, lots of hugs, great support by staff, no more loneliness, clean bathrooms, okay, people who really care even when you forget. We asked how would it impact you if the center ever closed? He says it can't happen, period, with an exclamation mark. We said, what would you like to say to our financial supporters? He said, thanks, comma, from the poor. And then he quoted Psalms 9:9. The Lord is a refuge for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. So on behalf of Michael and Rose and the thousands of seniors, our staff, our volunteers, our board, we want to just sincerely say thank you, first and foremost, for your faithful years of support to our program, our meal programs. So many people have received that nutritious and delicious meal. So many people have received that once a day contact where they otherwise would not have any connection with people because of your support. So I want to just say thank you for that. Thank you for seeing the importance of our mission and our services in our community. We thank you for that. I want to share, I'm almost done, and I'm going to have Chris Dock, our board president, finish the presentation. But the last picture is a picture of our lunch, and we had over 60 people attending that lunch. We had to quickly tear down our exercise, health and wellness, fitness time to accommodate the amount of people that were coming in for lunch. We have a medical equipment closet behind the screen, if you can see that. It's where we have wheelchairs, walkers, canes, shower chairs, all that kind of stuff is just piled on top of each other because there's not enough space. We have no proper lobby. Right where those folks are sitting is where we have to also prepare our Meals on Wheels. 160 meals get prepped in the mornings, and we take over that space to load them all up in hot boxes and coolers, so we're not able to have morning programs. We've simply outgrown our space. Although I'm so grateful to our founders for giving us that space as they did in 1985 when there were 7,000 people, it worked. We did some numbers all the way back to the year 2000 and discovered that we've given over 700,000 meals just since the year 2000 out of this small center. If you can look at it, you can see that it is formerly a bowling alley, so it's long and narrow and it has no windows, which can kind of be depressing. It also, before a bowling alley, was a skating rink. And if you've been to the center, then you know that there's a built-in ramp going into the dining hall. And if you're on roller skates and want that extra speed, that's a good thing. But when you're in a wheelchair or a walker, that's not really a good thing for our seniors. So we're looking forward to build a center that will be specifically designed for seniors, that will accommodate their special needs in a way that we can do. Our #1 complaint with our center is that there's no parking. We have only 7 spaces out front, and then we have just a few parking spaces beside our resale store, which is right next door. So the majority of these people had to park 2 stores down and walk on uneven ground in walkers and in canes to get to our center. We've had people tell us that they would come to the senior center, they would love to have lunch there, but every time they come, there's simply no space for them to park, and so they've given up. We know we're missing out on helping people that really need our support and our programs and our services simply because we don't have the space to accommodate them. We just simply have outgrown our space, and that's why we're here today. Before I pass it on to Chris, I just wanted to share a couple more facts in our community. 56% of Payson and Star Valley's population are over the age of 60. 87%, so almost 90% of our program participants are in the low income bracket. We've had people tell us that they had to make a decision whether to keep the utilities on or to eat. 85% of our program participants are over the age of 65. And 67% of our program participants are disabled. We serve over 300 seniors every day. On average, we make over 350 rides, 3,270 meals to the homebound, and 600 meals inside our center every single month. We believe that we can do so much more with a larger center. So many more seniors in our community are in need, but we're unable to meet that need because of the limited space that we have now. Again, thank you for your time, for your attentiveness to me, and I'm going to pass this on to Chris Stock, our board president.
Thank you, Chris. Just state your name. And
Yes, my name is Chris Dock. I'm the current president of the board of the Payson Senior Center. So thank you for your time. Thank you for inviting us here. As Debbie said, we're doing the best we can with our current facility. Our community continues to grow. The seniors, the number of seniors in our community grows. The need for our services grows. And our current building is just not, we can't grow in our current building. We're basically to the max right now. Just a quick story on how I became involved in the Payson Senior Center. A former client of our firm had left a donation in her estate to the Senior Center. That was my first interaction with them and what their services were. My experience with other senior centers in my past were more of the activity type centers, which is fantastic. The socialization and the activities are very important. But the nutrition services, Meals on Wheels, on-site meals, the transportation services, how they serve low-income, disabled, et cetera, in our community really touched my heart, and that's when I joined the board 4 years ago, initially as treasurer and now as president. The picture you're seeing is our lot, and so before I came on board to the board, the money from our former client was used to purchase this lot next to City Hall in Payson. It's a little under 2 acres. You can see it was pretty overgrown when we bought it. We've cleared it out quite a bit, fire-wised it. We want to be good stewards, good neighbors, and our vision is to turn that lot into something that looks like this. So this is a design that we've worked with an architect on, and it's based on feedback from our members, from our employees, our volunteers, and other senior centers that we've toured and talked with of, if you were going to build a senior center from the ground up, what would it look like? How would the spaces be organized and designed for efficiency, for safety, for maximum purpose of what we do? In the last 3 or 4 years, we've downsized the footprint of this as in the post-COVID world, and we all know construction costs have gone up. We've really put a fine tuning on what exactly do we need, and so we've actually reduced it from a 15,000 square footprint down to a little over 10,000. Our current facility is about 7,000 square feet, but it's not organized very well. So this would be a building that would serve our purpose for the next 50 years. So what would the impact of that new building be? Immediately, it would allow us to increase the number of on-site meals that we can offer by 50%. As Debbie mentioned, we're bound with the number of people that we can serve at any given time in our current dining hall, as well as the constraints of our kitchen. We could increase activity offerings by 75%. Meals on Wheels and Senior Express efficiency, and primarily Meals on Wheels, would become much more efficient. We're estimating a 25% improvement in just how well we can get food made, packaged, delivered out the door. Right now, the food is essentially started in the kitchen. It's brought out to the main dining room where there's a bit of an assembly line as these things are put into the distribution containers, and then they're manually walked through the center to the distribution trucks that are outside. Our new design would basically have our kitchen, our prep area, and our loading dock all designed properly so that we could manage this process much more efficiently. As Debbie mentioned, we just don't have enough parking. Our parking lot, we've done the best we can to maintain it, but we're limited on size. We're bound as far as whether we can go to the right or left. We can't expand our building or our parking lot. And we want to do this in a safe manner as well. So the new building would allow abundant parking, and it would be designed for maximum safety with the proper handicap accessible ramps and all of those types of things. And again, inside the building to improve the safety for the seniors that visit. Again, this is a repurposed skating rink and bowling alley and those types of things. So we're very diligent about safety and making sure that everything is as good as it can be. But again, we're talking about starting from the ground up with a building that's specifically designed for our seniors and our programs. So this is an example, or proves out what we've done so far. We didn't want to come to you with this as a concept. We wanted to kind of hit the ground running, make a lot of progress first on our own, and then explain to you how much we've accomplished thus far. So the first item was the land purchase. That was $440,000. That was purchased in 2018. Again, that has been completed, 100% funded. There's no debt on that. The design and engineering, working with the architect and engineering evaluations, that was $75,000. Again, those processes have been completed, 100% funded, no debt on that. We reached out to a construction firm. Getting the pricing is a little bit difficult these days because pricing changes so quickly. But we said, okay, if we were going to start this building process right now, what would that cost us? Basically, the building itself would be about $3.75 million. About $2.8 million of that is for the nutrition service areas, $950,000 for remaining areas. We have activity centers, arts and crafts, a workout facility, and those types of things, administrative offices. Of that $3.75 million, we've raised a little over $2.25 million of that. Again, those are individual donations that we've received and accumulated over time, and that leaves $1.49 million to complete the construction cost. For the interior build-out, we have about a $500,000 estimate on that. A little over half of that is for the nutrition service areas. The remaining areas are, again, it's about 50-50 in those areas. And for that, we have secured access to a $500,000 loan through Arizona Community Foundation, and that's at a fixed rate of 4%. And even as interest rates continue to go up, they've guaranteed us a 4% rate on that if we need to access those funds. So the total cost of everything from start to finish is $4.765 million, and we've got $3.275 million that we've funded or secured, so we're about 69% funded at this point. And so what we're looking for is how do we get the $1.49 million, and what's the timing of that, and what would that allow us to do? If we were to receive $1.49 million in a lump sum, we're essentially ready to hit the ground running to send out the RFP, get construction bids, choose a contractor, and get started basically this fall or early next winter. If we receive that in 2 years, of half of it this year and half of it next year, we could still begin this fall or winter because by the time we receive the second half, we'll be able to do a pay-as-we-go. And then the third option is if we divided that into 3 years with basically $500,000 this year, $500,000 next year, and the remainder in 2025, we would basically be able to begin construction next year with those, because of the $500,000 wouldn't quite get us to the point where we could actually start digging and be able to hit the milestone payments on the construction cost. That's essentially what we came here to talk to you about. Again, we wanted to be as self-sufficient as we could. We've done our diligence on trying to raise money without debt. One thing we don't want to do is for the remaining $1.5 million, take a $1.5 million loan that then burdens the operations where we can build this building, but then our center can't operate in a fiscally manageable position. So we operate every year on a pretty tight budget. We watch every penny. We don't have a lot of overage on what we do, so we want to make sure that we're not putting in $100,000 a year debt for the future to support this building. So again, that's our presentation. We're obviously open for questions and comments. And Debbie, if you want to join me, so open it up to you guys.
Debbie, thank you both, and Supervisor Humphrey. Questions, comments?
I'm going to turn it over to Supervisor Christensen, being that this is his deal, so I'll comment after.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a couple things that I think I need to add to your comments. Thanks so much for doing this. So the Payson Senior Center is a regional support for the region, not just Payson itself. It's been there a long time. So you own free and clear the property on Main Street, which you intend on keeping to use for other activities, hopefully, and always have the option of selling it. Okay. You're trying not to spend any money that's part of the natural yearly income that the senior center produces that self-supports itself. You're asking or wanting additional income to complete this project. You own free and clear the new location. You also are basically 70% funded toward that. The only shortfall you have is 1.4 million. Okay, so as long as we understand that, you are very solidly financially in the black when it comes to doing that. So you came to me, said, is there anything that we can do? Because by completing this project, as you stated, you're going to be able to increase your footprint in the community by large percentages, thousands of extra meals to an aging community, if you would. The area is aging. And so a tremendous benefit, and I love all of that. It's all good. And so my discussions with our county manager and others said that we would be able to, we, meaning the county, could support funding, say, things that were directly related to your meal program for seniors. Am I right about that, Michael? As far as we could help you with your kitchen, per se.
Supervisor Christensen, I'm going to defer to our county attorney on that.
Okay.
I know it's in state statute, and she's more familiar with that than I am.
So,
I think she left.
Yeah, I have her on the phone if you'd like to talk to her here.
okay, Jessica, the question is that if the Board of Supervisors wish to assist the Payson Senior Center, I've been told that the best and clearest path toward that would be to assist in funding their kitchen facilities in the new building.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the question. You're saying that it's to fund the building?
No, the what Mr. Menlove told me was that the county resources can be spent on senior nutrition.
Yes, the statute expands a little bit further than that. Just a moment. So the housing, would that be for, they're trying to have you guys pay for the building that is basically hosting the nutritional services?
Yes, right now we do support the Payson Senior Center for their nutrition program currently. And what they're asking is whether we can help support additional nutritional needs by helping them build their kitchen.
Okay, so according to the statute, the services that you would be allowed to provide to seniors or those with disabilities is including nursing care, shelter care, daycare, home maintenance, housekeeping, transportation, and nutritional services. The statute specifies that those services are not limited to those. So yes, because they would be utilizing the kitchen in order to provide nutritional services over to seniors, it would fit within the authority for the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jessica. So do you have anything to add to what would be involved in your request for the kitchen?
Yeah, so we do have, kind of looking at the breakdown of what aspects of the new building are based on nutrition services and those types of things. So we basically have the kitchen. What we did is we took our overall footprint and the estimate that we got on a per square foot construction cost. We basically then took all of the locations or parts of the building that are dedicated to nutrition. So the kitchen, and then plus the walk-in freezer, refrigerator, the Meals on Wheels area and prep area, the delivery, the drive-through, all those types of things that are supported on that. And then we also have, obviously, our main room is where we serve our congregate meals. So all of those spaces put together is basically about 70% of the new building is dedicated to providing those types of things. So that's not including the administrative offices or the workout facility, the arts and crafts room, all those types of things. And so for that, we were looking at the basic per square foot cost of that is about 2.8 million total. And then the build out of everything is about 250,000. So of the 4.25 million of the entire construction and build out, just over 3 million of that is related to nutrition services, both on-site meals in the kitchen and then the preparation and delivery for Meals on Wheels.
Okay, thank you. And so my question to you would be that if the board decided to assist in any way, where would that money come from?
Supervisor Christensen, I would have to defer that to County Manager James Menlove on that, since we're talking a large number. So
Well, we may be talking a large number.
yeah, so I can get with him and get back with you on that, sir.
Okay,
You bet.
thank you. All right, that's all I have.
So seniors are near and dear to our hearts. And we started that back when me and Tim stepped into office. All the senior centers were hurting for money back then. One of the things that I didn't understand then and I don't understand today is the cities and towns that these centers are in. What are they doing to help support?
Yes. So we had a good year this year. We do receive funding from Star Valley. The town of Star Valley Council agreed to double their support this year due to the prices of food and fuel going up. They realized that and they doubled their support this year. We just recently, last week, went to the town of Payson and asked for an increase in funding as well for the next fiscal year, which starts July 1st, and they increased it by 50%. And so they are helping us as well. Just so you all know, being a nonprofit is what we are, and so we hold the responsibility of funding those programs. Gila County, Town of Star Valley, Town of Payson, Area on Aging, and even some trickle-down ADAP funds for transportation. Our next fiscal year, we're looking at all of those coming at 37% of our budget. 63% of our operation budget comes from the hard work that we do with, like Chris said, donations, fundraising, writing foundation grants, and our resale store. So we're very proactive in funding, but that's how we're supported. And that's why, as Chris said, we came to you later. We didn't want to just come in at the very beginning and say, will you build this for us? We knew we had to do our due diligence first. We've been working on this since 2019, and we're to that point where we just need help to get to the finish line.
Sure.
We will be writing grants, obviously, when construction can start, and we can write grants for the furniture and different things like that. Of course, we will be doing that. But we are just here to say, we've come as far as we know we can come, and would you please just help us get to that finish line? And together we'll partner to make sure that our citizens in those communities have a place to go that they can depend on and be like family. We did visit recently Globe in Miami and Apache Junction Senior Centers. We made great connections with them, spoke to Tammy from Globe. We even offered to help them. We're very strong in the fact that we have great volunteer instructors for our health and wellness classes, where Tammy's lacking in that support area. So we're going to see if we can set up Zoom and do joint exercise classes together. We want to be not just limited to our region. We want to be a example and a resource for seniors everywhere. Who knows how big we can go? We're excited just to have that ability to be a service for seniors, even via Zoom. If anything came out of the COVID, it was Zoom. And we know now that we can reach so many people. We had seniors in Tucson that were exercising with us for the first time. And so we see ourselves much larger than the Payson area.
So don't mistake what I say, because if I could wave my wand, the seniors would have all the money they need.
I know.
Okay? So I don't want anybody to get mixed up and say, well, what the heck is this? You don't support seniors? I do, 100%. It's just money is tight. Things are hard. And when you're projecting numbers, like an increase in 50%, unfortunately, seniors pass on. So numbers in the future might be more than 50%, might be less. It's hard to say, you know. But everywhere we have in Gila County, when it comes to senior centers, we have issues. Those people are working their tails off, as you well know, to support this. The Meals on Wheels program, all of that is so important. You know, and you're right, it's for the folks that are stuck at home. They get to see somebody every other day or whatever it is. You know, so it means a lot to them. It means a lot to us, I feel like, as a county, because we don't shortchange that as much as we can. You know, we try and work and keep it all going. So on request, and this is a big ask.
Right.
This is a real big ask. Personally, it'd be nice if in my opinion, if there was maybe other partners stepping up to the plate too, like the town of Payson. The one thing I would ask you guys, and then maybe you've thought of this, if you keep the old building up and you've got this new one sitting there, why would you do that?
So if I can answer that, because I'm in charge of funding, and we anticipate major growth in this new building. And with that major growth is going to come a much larger budget of expenses to feed more people and to be there. And as you said, money is tight, and only 37% of our grouped funding from outside agencies is what our budget is made out of. So our resale store is one of our major funders. And so to be able to build off of that and use that space as more of a funding opportunity to offset our operational expenses that we anticipate are going to go up, we have to be smart about it. It wouldn't be, you know, fiduciary to get into a wonderful new center and then say we can only serve this amount of people, the same that we were serving in there. We understand it's going to cost more. So how are we going to in advance be prepared for that? And that's one of the discussions.
So your old building would basically be used for expanding your resale store? Is that what you're saying?
It could be. I mean, there's so much potential. Chris and I were talking about on the way up. So many people have ideas. It could be for renting. We could do rental income, short rental. Just kidding. You know,
go for it.
Don't go there too soon, huh? But you know, there's lots of potential for that. Our resale store is connected to the wall of our center. So if we were to sell, we had a realtor come in and say it would make best sense if you sold everything. So then we would be losing that income that's coming from our resale store, which is also a paid-for property.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but as you guys have already found out, when you build buildings like this, maintenance and operation is going to be a huge cost.
Yep.
It's tough.
Yeah, and to your point, we do have it on our contingency list of, that is an option of our current building of once we're in the new building, if we were to sell it outright. And as Debbie mentioned, there's definitely some downsides to that as far as our marketing and our presence in the community, as well as the funding that we receive from the thrift store. But it's definitely on our list of if we needed to take something and then pay it back. We're also looking at, while the new building is being constructed, we have to still continue in our current building. So we've got that thing where at some point we have two at the same time. We can't sell unless we were to sell our current property and then rent it back and those types of things, but there's a whole lot of variables in that as well. So
yeah, I think it's neat you guys already own the property and own it outright. So Supervisor Humphrey, questions or comments?
Yeah, I'll pick up the tail end of this time. I appreciate your passion and compassion for what you're doing. I mean, you can see it, and I appreciate it very much. And I see it throughout the county. And you know, we've got Hayden Winkleman, we've got people out of Tonto Basin, we've got Globe, we have Miami with their senior citizen, and it's like Christmas time and everybody's wanting a special Christmas present. And it's like, well, okay, but I got 5 or 6 to buy Christmas presents for. And so it's not that I don't support the seniors, because like Supervisor Klein when we started, there was really no organization to anything. And so we just dug through records to see what we were ended up giving to each as we went. Because it would be a little bit here, 6 months later they'd need a little bit, and so it was kind of an as need. So it's like, well, they shouldn't have to come to us every month for funding because they're doing without. So let's just kind of look at the big picture and try to go that way. And so we did, and it's kind of divided up. And so, you know, I mean, I can appreciate what you're wanting to do. And I guess one of my questions would be, is there other partners looking at perhaps maybe helping you with this $1.5 million that you need, and you know, so that would help us or help me decide, you know, where we stood, whether it was the full amount or partial amount or things of that nature, because when I talk to county manager or finance, it's gonna be, okay, if we're able to do this, then what are we gonna be able to do for Miami? What are we gonna be able to do for Globe? And to me, there's no north and south. I'm not going there. But it's like everybody has seniors that are in very much need. And it seems for some reason that our states and federal government, in my opinion, aren't kicking in as much as they should. And because a lot of that weight comes back to the county. And that's why we try to come up with yearly money to help disperse. But I think it's a great project, but like I say, when I go forward with staff, it's gonna be, okay, if we've got a pot of money, how far will that pot of money go for that particular purpose?
Which is why we wanted to make sure that we did our due diligence first and before coming to you. You know, this wasn't just the easy way out for us to go to the Gila County supervisors and touch their hearts because there's, you know, you guys care. But it was, let's do is what we can do on our own as far as we can go. Let's push hard, and that's what we've done. And that's where we're at. So if you show them the big number and then show them what we're asking. And then my other, I thought, and I'm not sure the details of this, but if you go and you start to ask about where the funding can come from, I'm not sure if you all will have a better opportunity in recruiting ARPA funds, and I don't know if those could be applied for the center, but we're asking it, you know, thinking outside of the box, any unique ways that we can partner to get this accomplished with, you know, of course we'll be happy to do our part in that.
So, so if we have an opportunity, maybe staff can look into it and see if there's some more funds out there that the county could acquire from different areas, Michael, for something like this?
Supervisor, so what exactly are you asking?
You're really good at finding money, Michael. I've seen that in the health department. Let's work your magic.
Senior Center, they're gonna be looking for grants for this.
So that is one thing I wanted to ask you guys too. Have you been in touch with the USDA on grant money of any?
Well, I actually started with the senator, and they're the ones that referred me to you. I went straight to the top. I mean, not to the top, but maybe I should have started at the very top. But and they're the ones that said to go to the county supervisors for support on this project, and so that's kind of how the path led back, you know, to you all.
So, Michael, you think from a county perspective, we could look around and see what other monies are out there that may be available to cut this $1.5 million down a little bit?
I would have to discuss this with the county attorney, since that might be providing services for an organization might come in conflict with a gift clause or something like that.
I would say something, but she's probably still got her phone on, huh?
Right. So I would have to double check with the county attorney and then sit down with the county manager and maybe do another work session.
One thing for you guys though would really be worth your call is to contact USDA in Phoenix. On that, and they're really good to work with, and check that out as well. I mean, we've seen them fund a lot of different things, and if there's any way that we can start whittling away at this balance and see where we can go from there, it would help us. I know as a county. You guys agree?
I do, and I also appreciate these work sessions, and I appreciate you coming to us for a work session. Because I fight for a work session, because how do you know what everybody needs unless you, and this gives you an opportunity to bring it to the supervisors as well as to staff. And so, you know, if it's something that we can't, well, we have a lot more eyes, ears, and people looking for I cans. And so, yeah, thank you very much. And so, you know, we have Amy, our grant writer, and everybody here. So, you know, we can start looking. And the good thing is we don't have to make a decision today, but we can look at different options and maybe different funding sources. So
yeah, we appreciate that very much. Thank you for the guidance.
Like I say, I appreciate your passion for what you're doing. It shows.
Thank you
very much.
Chairman?
There she is. Go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah, so in regard to the gift clause, there's no concern there because what the authority is basically saying that the county has the ability to implement those programs to provide these services to persons of 60 years or older. If they aren't implementing those programs, they'll have the authority to contract with federal, state, local, or other providers to provide those services. So it's specific authority, you're contracting, you're getting consideration back. Instead of the county running their own program, they're basically hiring the senior center so that they can run the program.
Thank you, Jessica. That makes sense. So,
And that's what makes us unique is that with Miami and Globe, Hattie Junction, they're city run. We're an independent nonprofit. And so our support, again, the burden really falls on us to go out and get that funding and that support and those partnerships.
Mr. Chairman, I think too, it should be clear that this isn't a 1.4 million or nothing kind of a consideration. That you're just asking for help toward this project, and I think it would be good if we asked staff to investigate funding sources and how, and give us options that we can. So this work session is to really just make us aware of the great things you're doing and what you want to do, and then staff will make us aware what our options are.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And again, we wanted to come and show you what the big number was, how far we've gotten on our own. And to your point, it's not, if we don't get 1.49, then we, you know, it's not all or nothing. I mean, we're continuing to piece things together. So any support we get, just thrilled and humbled by. So
yeah, so I get that as well, but I always look at the end product too. And that is getting that building built.
Right.
So, and you know, like on your option 3 on the slide, where you can, you know, come up with 500,000 now, 500,000 next year. Fine and dandy, but we've all seen the difference in prices and cost and inflation and all that. And the next thing you know, you might be well above what you originally needed to finish a job that's already started.
right. Yeah, and exactly right. I mean, as we said, we've reduced our footprint already because of the expansion and costs. But if we were building this building 4 years ago, we'd basically be fully funded right now. Unfortunately, we're not.
Right.
We didn't have the, 2.3 million that we have in the reserve right now for it. We didn't have that 4 years ago. But yeah, it's a bit of a moving target as the costs continue to kind of.
Right.
We're hoping the costs aren't outpacing our progress.
Well, I would hope not either, but I don't know.
Right.
You know, so. Well, thank you both
you.
for here, and I'm sure we look forward to more discussion. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it. Thank you
Appreciate
for
it
your
very
time.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to D, information discussion regarding the bid process and prospective timelines for the Facilities Department's capital improvement projects. Joseph?
Good morning, Chairman, Board of Supervisors. So today what we're going to be presenting is just a real basic baseline for our procurement process through capital projects and kind of the decision matrix that kind of goes with that. And the couple of things to highlight with it is the pre and post of that procurement process. So we're not going to dive too far into the procurement itself, but we're going to be able to highlight that process and give a tentative time frame, what we look at and how long it takes. With that being said, if you have any questions along the way, please let me know, and I'll be happy to answer it. And at the end, we'll also have a moment for comments. So here, from initiation project request, one of the first things we look at is if it's over 5,000. So throughout this entire process, we're looking at our procurement thresholds and also networking with our procurement team. So if it's under 5,000, we start looking at a completely different purchase procurement pathway. Usually they're pretty quick with that, with our side and the procurement team. If we're over 5,000, we immediately start looking at higher approval and thresholds. So county manager approval over 5,000 will be required, and that's at a verbal approval. That's not necessarily a sign-off or official. For example, like some of our 25,000, 50,000, and our 100,000. So, so if we just had an example of the 5,000, if it's over, we go with county manager approval. if it is to initiate a capital project. So just because it's over 5,000 doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a capital project. There's quite a few departments where they have internal funding and sourced from their department. So it can be $15,000 and it won't necessarily fall into the capital.
So Joseph, if I can, and maybe Marin or Amy want to answer this, but why $5,000? Why is it $5,000? Why isn't it 10,000 or 25?
So from our point of view, it falls into policy. What that policy is derived from, I'd have to dig deeper into that.
Is it our policy, Marin, that does this? And so it's us that have control over that $5,000 mark. I mean, as a board, we have the option, if you will, if we wanted to change that, right?
From my understanding, yes.
Okay, continue on. Thank you, Joseph.
No problem. So, so right there, we determine whether it's going to be capital or if it's going to be internal. Now, there's a few things to keep in mind again as we go through this. This is just the baseline. There's plenty of decisions or options or thresholds that come along and get us in a completely different branch. We would easily be into about 25 slides by the time we started taking all of the options. So again, this is just the baseline. And this can take anywhere from 1 to 6 months. If everything is smooth, it's not a complex scope of work, we can do it in weeks. But we're usually landing about the 1 month as an average. So one of the first things that we step into if we get approval, say this project that we're given an example for the baseline, this project meets all the requirements for a capital project. A perfect example is an HVAC system that we're looking to replace is going to go over $50,000 threshold. That is another option where it's a direct replacement. So there again, this is just an example of so many different ways it can go. So a direct replacement, pretty straightforward. We're not going to go into developing a significant amount of scope of work. We're not going to go into some of the project as a fresh project kickoff. What this will outline is a perfect example is going to be up in our Payson project for the courts or the SO remodel. There, we have to develop a scope of work that's in line with what we're trying to do, make sure that it's going to match with the strategic plan of the county and also meet all the procurement requirements, code, and a few other things that are tied into that. Just as a real quick highlight, that can take architectural, project meeting feasibility, developing the project charter with the customer. So there is a lot that goes into some of these steps in their full processes, and they can be time consuming. But something to note, we're always looking at ways that we can chip away at that time and become more efficient. With that being said, there's just some of these options that require that time, and it's good for us to take the time that that requires, such as engineering and some of the architectural. But something to keep in mind, some of the ways that we're streamlining this process as we're starting to cut through these is we're looking at some of the architectural engineering and really identifying, hey, do we really need to have this go through an engineering process? Do we need to go through an architectural process? And that's a very simple question on the front end of it, just hearing it out loud. But there's a lot that goes into that from the team evaluating it, looking at some of the solutions and some of those options. But that's an opportunity for us to have not just a time save, but a cost savings. And identifying the ones that do require it. So again, anything that's going to be over 50,000, if that's a yes, then we're going to go through agenda, request, bid for a scope of work, and with the scope of work, and then also BOS approval to go out for bid. So those are two different steps. One to come before you to say, hey, we want to present this project. It meets some of the criteria for a strategic plan, aligns with our mission, our capabilities, and this is why we want to do it. Once we go out for bid, that can take anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks, depending on what we receive and how we go out for that bid. Once we get those, we come back to the BOS, and then we ask for permission again to be able to proceed with whatever recommendation that we're going to be presenting towards you as a board. If it's under 50,000, the scope of work and everything that goes along with it allows us to stay underneath that threshold, and that approval process looks a lot different. We're able to present the same thing that we would be presenting to the Board of Supervisors. We're able to present that to county management and administration.
And so that $50,000 mark is the exact issue that I had with the vet center when we upped it to 100,000. So it's the same principle as the $5,000 mark. That's all under policy that we have control of as a board.
Roger that. Yes, sir.
So this is really good, because if you look at that right there, you can see kind of the timeline that's on the screen, but it can also be a little longer than that too at times.
It absolutely can. So there's so many variables that go into this process that it can certainly be longer.
Which I appreciate that, because that was the frustration I was having with that particular project. It was just taking a ton of time to do that. And so as we look at those figures, you can see the issue there.
Roger that. It's something that we brought before the BOS a couple of months ago on one of our work sessions. Is we're working with the admin team to identify ways that we can streamline that. And we've come up with some really good solutions. I don't want to dive too far into those solutions quite yet. It'd be premature before we can really hammer out a few details. But there's an opportunity for us to be able to support programs within the county and get some of our projects streamlined and fast-tracked. And when I say fast-tracked, significant reduction in time, but more importantly, or just as important, is the cost that's related to that time.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, okay, this is based, and we're doing the 50,000, and that's fine. And like you say, you're trying to streamline more. I guess kind of a side question is for the project that Supervisor Klein is working on up north. Has the increase of the approval amount, has it helped streamline, or has it made a whole lot of difference, or I guess that's my question.
Chairman, Supervisor Humphrey, absolutely great question. It has helped significantly. A real basic example is some of our furniture procurement just went just over that 50,000, so we're going to have to go through this process. Significant length difference in time. That would have put us past what our expected open date. So our construction was streamlined. We're looking at a July time frame, but the furniture wasn't going to be there. So we're looking at lining up some of the construction with the opening and lining up the operations. So we have a lease that's going to be coming up in that location and getting some of our maintenance operations going. So it has made a huge difference in the time.
Okay, so, Mr. Chair, if I may continue.
Oh, absolutely.
So then, I guess then that's good for a particular project, but maybe not necessary for everything. The increase in the value. I mean, like you said, it's helped expedite that project as far as buying furniture and stuff that was marginally over 50.
Mm-hmm.
But like I say, from day-to-day use, to increase the 50,000 to 100,000 for everyday operating costs, would it streamline things? Would it not? I mean, because it seems like everything's designed on the 50, and it seems to work pretty well. But you say it's streamlined the project that it was specifically accepted for. And I guess what I'm fishing for is so that 100,000 helped that project. So I'm just wondering, going to the future, to be able to make that for particular projects, expediting special projects instead of just day-to-day county functions.
Roger that. So with that, Supervisor Humphrey, whatever threshold is there, we have solutions and ways to work with it. I can't definitively say if we increase it to 100,000 or 200,000, whether that would streamline every single project. The direction we're trying to take all of our construction projects is so that it is one cost up front. The challenge that we're running into is we're transitioning from an old way of business to something that is completely different. The old way of business was, it's very easy to piecemeal a project to get it moving forward, but we run into significant challenges when it comes to the timelines and the costs. So in those examples, increasing it without a doubt would make an impact on our timeline. If we continue the pathway that we're streamlining, there may be certain situations where it would be helpful, but I think that would be something that would be left up to the board to decide.
So I believe, and Michael, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if there's another project comes to us, and we're kind of looking at that time frame again, we can go back in there and change that to the $100,000 for another particular project. We can work with that if we need to, right?
Chairman, members of the board, yeah, that'd be a consideration the board can have, obviously, but I want to clarify a little bit something that we're talking about. The $100,000 mark that the board set for the Pleasant Valley retreat was to sign contracts, not to change the procurement process as a whole. So
Right.
As you asked Joseph questions, and just
Right.
keep that in mind, that it's for the contracts that the county manager can sign up to $100,000 for Pleasant Valley only. And then all the other contracts are still
50,000. So that's absolutely correct, Michael, and I'm sorry I didn't point that out, but it's the timeline that was eating us up on those coming in, getting them on the agenda, up in front of the board, getting us to put a bid out, coming back in front of the board to accept a bid for $75,000, let's say, and all that. We were running into a lot of time. And all the time, I'm sitting there twisting in circles, not being very happy. And so that's why I pushed that, was so that James could have that authority to sign up to, I think it's 100,000 or just a little under 100,000, something like that. Anyway, and push those forward. And so when it came to something like the furniture, well, it's probably not only the things like furniture now, everything has increased in value. If you're going to buy something, you can easily spend 50,000 or less to the blink of an eye. So that's where I was at, with that.
And with that, Chairman, when we transition away from our capital projects as a discussion and have a light conversation with just the maintenance side, it's not uncommon for some of our projects to clear that 50,000. So when we look at some of our emergency procurement, we still have a lot of challenges with our timelines. So if it clears 50,000, that would be an example of being able to crunch that timeline. But there again, that'd be up to the BOS.
So I think, and this is good information too for all of us, is that one of the options that we have when we're sitting here as chairman, we can bump those meetings up. We can say, okay, in 4 or 5 days, we're going to have a special meeting and Sam's going to put it all together and we're going to approve a contract and we're going to go on with life. We can do that. I know you guys as department heads, and probably Sam's going to throw something at me in a minute, but it puts a little bit of a bigger load on you. But that's something that I didn't do. Had I really sat back and thought about it, I probably would have in a time or two, and just get those out there, because otherwise we're running into, well, it's already 1st of June. We might get it on the board in front of us the first week in July, things like that. So there's options, I guess, is what I'm saying. Michael?
Yeah. Chairman, members of the board, one of the considerations we have for putting items quickly into agenda quick is, it has to be reviewed by the county attorney. And so we don't want to put the county attorney in a stressful situation where they have to continually, review these items that come up out of nowhere. So,
do you want me to comment on that one, Michael?
No, sir, I'm just trying to give you some information during the work session.
Thank you so much. I love work sessions. Go ahead, Joseph.
Thank you. So back to this slide here, if we go out for request for proposal advertisement by finance, we do a pre-bid walkthrough once that contractor is selected. Again, to note, This doesn't capture the procurement process. So on the finance team, there are a lot of things that they put their hands on and a lot of decisions that they have to go through. And honestly, I feel that they do it in a pretty quick, short order when you really look at how much they have to go through to get these pushed out for bid. So once we select that contract, again, we start looking at whether that's going to go through two different pathways, over 50K and under 50K. So if we go over, there again, we submit the agenda request for proposal. Contractor request usually is put in from the finance department, and then we go to the BOS approval for contract. So here, this is where it kind of shows an example of how it can start to get a little bit complex. There's a lot of dependencies that go into this that allows us to go to different pathways. And this is one of the challenging things that we run into from our department. So with that, once we get approval, then we're looking at 2 to 6 weeks for project launch. Again, this is just a baseline for this project. And again, this can take anywhere from a couple of weeks all the way out to a year. Just recently, when I say recently, within the last year, we've gotten six capital projects up off the ground that have been shelved for quite some time. And that's extremely challenging when you pull it off of the shelf to know the status of it and to be able to know what pathway or where you need to put it back into play. With that being said, we have anywhere from 80 to 70 or 75 to 80 projects from our maintenance side that are peppered in through this as far as resources go. So again, it can take anywhere from 1 month to 1 year. And right now we're ahead of schedule on 2 of our capital projects and now another capital project with the new timeline. So take that for what it's worth when I say that is also ahead of schedule. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Joseph. Supervisor Humphrey?
No, I have no questions. I think it's good that you have a pattern or a map to help these projects get from beginning to end. I think that's a great thing. And so when I asked the question earlier, it was just in my view of trying to help you streamline things without giving too much leeway out there that I'm not watching, what's going on out of the chicken house, so.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I and that's why I was, so I think it's great that you do have a pathway for things to not fall in the cracks. And appreciate you creating this and keeping it rolling. Thank you.
Supervisor Christensen?
Thank you, Joseph, for the presentation. And I'm just going to add a few comments to the $50,000 that we were talking about a minute ago. So if that's not the right number, then we should consider a change. If it's costing us more money to have that number, or it's slowing projects down because of it, creating issues because it's not the right number anymore, then we should consider changing it. And to me, I don't have a problem with changing it, because if we can trust the system and the personnel for decision-making below 50,000, why can't we have that same trust factor below 100,000 or 80,000 or something else? So to me, I think we can trust the system going. I don't see abuses being made below the 50,000, and I don't think I'm seeing abuses being made at Pleasant Valley below 100,000. So to me, it's just a number, and if it's a stumbling block, we should consider changing it.
Roger that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So the dollar figures isn't as big a concern to me as it is your staffing and your manpower. So talk to me about that, Joseph.
Chairman, Board of Supervisors, it's a challenge when it comes to not just our projects, but our maintenance. With that being said, working with county admin team, it's made a huge difference, some of the things that we've been able to do. So within our department, being able to improve some of our processes, whether it's removing some of our steps or adding some of it, has made a significant change. Also getting more resources when it comes to some of our admin team. So adding the project coordinator is a huge help when it comes to us being able to navigate some of these projects. Something to emphasize is that's not so we can add more projects, that's so that we can currently maintain the tempo. So with that being said, there's multiple capital projects that would be categorized as complex, and we're able to support that. So here soon, we're gonna be getting that project coordinator on board.
So I guess my idea of watching us as a board, we've kind of set the tempo for we're all into projects. You know, if you look back 6 years, 7 years ago now, when me and Tim stepped on board to where we are today, and the amount of projects that we have under our belt, you know, that's still going on, or even that's been finished, and then you look at what we still have going on as far as like the fairgrounds and whatnot. So we're not bashful, I feel like, as a county, of dodging or ducking projects. I don't see that going forward either.
Roger that.
So, and then also too, we have an aging infrastructure. This building is one of them that is an issue. We have a jail right there below us. That's another issue. And we only have so many of you guys.
Yes, sir.
So, you know, from my standpoint, I think that's more important to me than the numbers on the screen. We can deal with that if it's in policy, and we can work at that. But the last thing I would like, the last thing I would want to see is burning your crew out. You know, whether that's with maintenance or new projects or anything like that. So just keep that in mind.
Roger that. Chairman, Board, we absolutely appreciate that support and that forward outlook. The good news is we're having those conversations throughout the entire operation to include county admin. So it's something we're working on.
I would appreciate that, Joseph. Anything else from you guys? Did that
Good, thanks.
work? Any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
Comments.
Go ahead.
Yes, Chairman, member supervisors. So in regard to projects that need to be done timely, and you know, there's a concern of whether or not it can go before the board to be able to put it out for bid and then come back before the board when you're trying to contract with the most successful bidder. There is also the process to go through state procurement. Those are already in compliance with the procurement laws. The state has already gone through that. So basically those companies are there to be able to hire without going to put it out on bid. So that would shorten the process. I do know that the board likes to contract with local contractors. So that might be a conflict there because, you know, state procurement doesn't always work with Gila County contractors. But also, in regard to the review Michael O'Driscoll brought up, the county attorney's office, they did implement a new rule as far as late submittals. Basically what it means is there needs to be an emergency for the county attorney to review that within a week notice. For that emergency clause to become effective, one, there has to be basically an emergency that you need to handle right away, and two, the county didn't have notice about it. So with those two factors, sometimes there is a situation where the chief county deputy would go ahead and authorize the county attorney's office to review it quickly. But certainly if there's something that needs to get done, we can consider that as well.
Jessica, I appreciate that too, and I know you work real hard to accommodate all that, and I don't know how many times it's happened in the past, but I think overall we've been able to kind of go through our regular process for the most part, unless it's something as emergency or something like that.
Correct, Supervisor, or Chairman and Supervisors. Any option that is chosen, it's going to go through the legal process, whether it's with our procurement team or our legal team.
Right.
So anything that's going to be recommended, I know from our side of the house or discussion with the admin team, it's with that in count. So we don't look at trying to circumnavigate. We're just simply looking at how we can compress timelines, streamline some of the decisions, and maybe remove some of the repetitive processes. But with that being said, again, we make sure that we're going to be holding to all of those processes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So one thing that Jessica brought up, and I'm glad she did, was the idea of working with the state procurement process, like Meridian that's doing the job up there. That has worked out very well. But the one thing I was going to ask you, and I've been meaning to ask you, like when it comes to our local contractors, does an outfit like Meridian have it set up so if a contractor wants to be a part of their project or on a list that they could maybe participate, that they could sign up with them on, that maybe we could pass around to our locals if they're interested?
Yes. So with Gordian, when we select, say, a general contractor, it is in their benefit just as much as ours for them to try and select someone local. Now, when we start stepping away from that is when we start trying to put criteria on them that's a little bit more compressed, say a timeline. They're going to try and go to someone that they know is going to try and meet that timeline. But say we just have a general timeline of the project, basic scope, it's to their benefit to try and have someone local. And so far that we've been working with Gordian, that's part of that conversation. And they don't just kind of hear us, they're part of that conversation, trying to identify local contractors that we would like to see put into there, or trades that we're looking at that we know are local. For some of it could be some of our HVAC and pretty much any of the trades. So they're a huge partner in that. There's some things that we're looking at in the future, being part of Gordian, and I don't want to go too far in depth with that without discussing more in depth with the admin team. But there is some promising options there that are going to be able to support local business, and I think that's the big highlight out of that without going too far in depth.
Well, that sounds good, Joseph, and I, for one, look forward to that conversation as well. So with that, I think, Joseph, thank you. It is now 12:35. What I'd like to do is take a break. People can grab them a snack or whatever, and we'll come back at, how about 1 o'clock? Is that good?
That's great. Thank you.
All right. What? Okay, let's come back at 1:15. How's that? Is that better?
Not much.
Order just in time to turn around and adjourn it. So all the agenda items that's left, we will pick those up. Michael will be working on another work session to bring those forward. We are lacking an attorney this afternoon, so we'll set the rest of it aside and call it a day. Thank you so much. We really enjoy these work sessions, and we'll pick it up where we left off. Thanks.